Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. In this video, we're going to be painting a desert scene, and we're going to be using an orange background. And I wanted to show how you can let some of that show through and it enhances your painting. So this is the brushes that I'm going to be using if you follow along traditionally. And we can use the flat wash all the way down to a little script brush to do the detail work. Here's the canvas that I use. I like to use canvas board, and I do also like to use the stretched canvas that has the really thick sides that you can paint on, and that way you don't need to frame your painting then. Here are the colors that I use for my painting. I use Grumbacher Academy acrylics usually, and also Liquitex acrylics. So just keep in mind that some of the colors might have a few different names according to the brand. The app that we're going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android. And here I'm going to go ahead and make kind of a burnt orange type of a background. And we're going to go ahead and just cover the whole canvas with that. And if you're following along traditionally, you probably could use some cadmium orange and mix it with some burnt sienna just to kind of make a little a brownish orange color. And just go ahead and cover the whole canvas because we want the background to be this orange color. You can also make it a little bit more brown if you want to. It just depends kind of on what you are aiming for when you do this painting. And I've been watching several painters on Instagram do this technique, and it always turns out really pretty, so I thought that I would try it. So here I'm just drawing the background, and once you get the canvas painted and make sure that the paint is all dry, you can use a charcoal pencil or a little stick of charcoal and just kind of make a rough sketch of where the mountains are going to be, where the clouds are going to be, and the saguaros. And just kind of sketch that in. You don't have to have a big detailed sketch for this. Just kind of give some indications of where you want it and some proportions. And so here I'm going to start on the clouds in the sky. And I'm going to use the darker blue colors first to put in for the shapes of the clouds. And if you're following along traditionally with acrylics, probably use your bristle brush or your filbert brush to do this. And you can use ultramarine blue and mix it a little bit with some burnt sienna, and burnt sienna will gray out the blue just a little bit and make it not quite as bright. It'll give it kind of a more natural color. And then add white acrylic gesso, and you can make different shades of blue there. So I've got some darker grays and some medium grays and some light blues for the clouds. And here I'm just adding in the shapes and the general area where the light and dark pockets are in the cloud. And I'm also letting some of the orange background come through just to give it some warm color. And here I'm just working on adding a little bit of some purple. You can add some purple with some ultramarine blue for this, just to give it kind of a variation in your clouds. And so I'm kind of working on that. And the highlights, you can go ahead and add later on. But here I'm doing sort of the underpainting first. And underpainting is just the first layer of your painting. And on here I'm adding some of the browns for the hills. They're kind of a greenish brown because it's the vegetation out there that's greasewood and other things like the cactuses, and some of the grass is also kind of greenish looking or yellow ochre color. And you can use your bristle brush, your filbert brush, or your flat brush if you're following along traditionally, and just go ahead and sort of put in the grass and the colors, and you can let some of the background of the canvas come through here too, just to give it some highlight colors. And if you notice in the photo reference that I got off Pixabay, you can see that the dirt is kind of orangey looking, and especially on the mountains in the background. And so just go ahead and let a little bit of that peep through there. And then I'm adding some greens, and you can use, if you're following along traditionally, Hooker's green with some burnt sienna mixed in with it and some yellow ochre. And that kind of gives that that desert vegetation look. It's kind of a sage green or an army green. And then here I'm adding some darker blue to the clouds again, and also sort of working on the shape of the mountains. You can shape those by how you add the blue around the tops of them. Of course, if you're working with watercolors, you kind of want to have a better sketch and a more permanent sketch. But if you're working with acrylics or oils, you can always just paint over things and bring them out later on. Also, you can kind of do that with gouache, but with watercolor, you have to have everything pre-planned out. So here I'm just adding some darker blue. You can use ultramarine blue. You might want to take your filbert brush and work on it here. And if you're following along with Infinite Painter, there's some oil brushes that you can download if you get on the forum of Infinite Painter. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of brushes that people have uploaded for other people to use, and they are kind of they're oil based. They look like oil brushes and acrylic brushes, and so I'm working with some of those. And you can also just use the regular paint category. I like the filbert brush a lot. And here I'm just kind of adding a bunch of grays and blues to this, and working on the shape of the clouds, because we need some big puffy shapes for these clouds. And then I'm adding a light blue. And if you do this with your acrylics, just take some white acrylic gesso with a touch of blue and a touch of cadmium orange to really bring out the top highlights. And here you can see the brushes that I'm using. I downloaded some tatami oil. I think that's how I pronounce it. But anyway, you can see what I've got on the screen there. And this is a user from Infinite Painter who uploaded a whole bunch of brushes that you can download and import into Infinite Painter, and they're really nice. I really like them a lot. And they're just kind of variations on the oil brushes and the acrylic brushes that are that come with the program originally. And here I'm just kind of working on the shape of the clouds, and notice that I'm not killing all the orange in the background. I want some of that background orange to show through. I've decided that it looks really nice, and it just kind of gives it more depth and more color to this painting. So that's one of the advantages of working on a toned background, is that you can let it show through some of your paint, and it will just kind of add to your painting, give it a kind of a warm tone. You can also make a cool background if you want to, and let it have a cool tone. It just depends on what exactly that you want. And here I'm blending the clouds together, and you would do this if you're working traditionally with a paper towel or a dry brush, or even your finger if you want to, but you get paint all over your hands, so it's better just to use a paper towel or a dry brush or something. And if you're doing this with acrylics, you want to blend that in sort of immediately, because you don't want hard edges with acrylics, because they're hard to cover up. Acrylics are not quite as thick as oils, so you want to blend things in immediately when you are using acrylics. And so I'm just kind of working on the shape of the clouds here, adding pockets of dark and light. I want some gray looking colors, and then I want some blue looking colors, and it's just a picture of a rainstorm. That it looks like that it's raining a little bit on the other side of the mountains there. So you want to try to get that dark blue color that's right above the mountains there, just to give the look of a distant rain shower in the desert. And so I'm just kind of working on that and trying to get that effect there. And so you can move your photo reference around. This is one of the reasons that I like Infinite Painter, is because you can get photo references on the screen, and then you can put that one above there, so that I can work on the shape of the mountains and get them more accurate. And so that's what I'm doing there, is trying to get a more accurate shape of the mountains. So this is the end of part 1 of my Saguaros series, and in part 2 we're going to continue on working on the mountains and the vegetation. And so if you want to see that, hit the subscribe button. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.